Hello, everyone. Today we are going to be exploring the 12 biological levels of organization as well as looking at the interconnection and interaction among levels and our environment. We will first begin by exploring each of the 12 levels of biological organization.
Hello, my name is Akhil, and I'll be talking about the atom, molecule, and organelle. Atoms are the basic units of matter and defining structures of elements. They make up everything in this world that you can think of. Molecule is the next step of classification. A molecule is two or more atoms that form a chemical bond together to create something new. The organelle is a specific structure within the cell, and they are all important in their different ways.
Hello, today I'll be talking about the levels of organization, specifically about cells, tissues, and organs. A cell is a basic unit of structure and function of all living things, whether it be eukaryote or prokaryote. Next, you have a tissue, which is a group of cells of the same kind that perform the same function. An example of this would be a muscle tissue or a nervous tissue. Last but not least, we have an organ, which is a structure composed of two or more types of tissues. The tissues of an organ work together to perform a specific function. An example of this would be a heart for an animal or roots for a plant.
An organ system is a group of organs that work together to perform a certain function in an organism's body. For example, the respiratory system helps humans move oxygen into their bodies and remove waste gases like carbon dioxide. Organ systems are composed of organs and compose organisms. An organism is any being that fulfills the properties of life. For example, animals such as grizzly bears, plants, or single-celled organisms such as bacteria. Organisms are composed of organ systems and in turn compose populations. A population is a collection of the organisms of the same species that live in the same area and that can interbreed. An example of a population is the painted wolves living in Gorongosa National Park in Mozambique. Populations are composed of organisms and can form communities.
Our next level of organization is a community. A community is all of the populations that live in the same area, such as all of the animal and plant populations. Our next level is an ecosystem. An ecosystem consists of all living things, which are our biotic factors, and all non-living things are abiotic factors, together in a given area. Our next and final level is the biosphere, which is the part of Earth where all life exists, including all land, water, and air where living things can be found. The biosphere contains many biomes, which are just a group of similar ecosystems. Now that we have an understanding of the 12 biological levels of organization, we're going to look at some relationships/interactions among these levels.
It is common that the levels of organization interact with each other. The small intestine interacts with bacteria that helps digest food, which is lactobacillus. Lactobacillus lives in the small intestine, which helps digest carbohydrates and dairy products. Lactobacillus produces lactic acid, which keeps the gut pH level stable and prevents bad bacteria from growing. With this interaction between these levels of organization, this leads to the stability of the environment. With cells helping organs, it can increase the lifetime of organisms. This in turn helps the environment by giving more organisms.
Organ systems work together in order for an organism to function. However, if even one organ system has a problem, the organism may die. For example, coronary artery disease, a disease of the circulatory system, is the leading cause of death in Americans.
The relationship between these classification levels is quite important. The molecule contains stuff like water and oxygen, and without those things, a lot of biotic organisms would not be able to survive. As a result, without many of these organisms, ecosystems would collapse, leading to the eventual destruction of the biosphere.
Another relationship we can look at is between populations and ecosystems. We know that populations interact with other biotic and abiotic factors. We also know that without a certain population, the ecosystem can become imbalanced and set off a chain reaction. For example, in this ecosystem, the plants use the sun, an abiotic factor, for photosynthesis. Without the sun, plants wouldn't be able to survive. Without plants, herbivores and omnivores will slowly die out. Carnivores will also die out without any remaining food sources. The entire ecosystem would collapse, all due to a few populations, showing the interdependence among these levels. We are now going to look at some analogies that will help you understand the importance of relationships between levels of organization.
A great way to memorize the levels of organizations between cells, tissues, and organs is a metal bridge. A metal bridge is made out of three parts: the individual bars, the racks, and the bridge itself. The individual bars act like cells, and when you combine them together, you get a rack, which acts like a tissue, since tissues are made out of multiple cells. And then when you combine tissues together, you get an organ. And by combining many racks together, you get a whole bridge. This is a really great way to remember the levels of organization between cells, tissues, and organs.
The relationship between these levels can be best described through a game called Jenga. In a Jenga game, you need to remove certain blocks and not let the tower fall. Similarly, if you were to remove any one level from the levels of classification, the entire biosphere would fall.
Let's take a look at some real-world examples that show the relationship between an individual level and the entire system.
An example of how an organism can affect all other levels can be shown through the invasive kudzu plant species. In the early 1900s, a few kudzu plants were introduced into the United States for decoration. However, kudzu spread so quickly that it quickly became an invasive species. Kudzu plants kill other plants by smothering them in leaves. Kudzu is so dominant that only other invasive species can compete with it. Kudzu affects all levels of organizations because when it kills other plants, animals that depend on those plants also suffer, disrupting the food web and eventually all levels of organization.
Yellowstone National Park is known for being a huge tourist destination. It contains a wide variety of plants and animals with over 1,300 plant species and 500 animal species. However, this was not always the case. In the 20th century, Yellowstone's biodiversity significantly decreased due to poaching of wolves. Without an apex predator, overgrazing and soil erosion increased. When wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone in 1995, within a decade, not only had wolf populations stabilized, but so had herbivores. Vegetation regrew, riverbanks repopulated, and it proved how one simple organism composed of cells was able to impact an entire life-filled ecosystem.